And he says it with the kind of humility that we so admire in leaders, and I admire in my running mate. America's choice has never been clearer, I believe. The most straight-talking candidate since Ronald Reagan is running against one of the most dishonest candidates ever. Well, let me say, as I stand in this hallowed place, the American people picked a bold truth teller in 1980, and I know they're going to elect a bold truth teller in 2016. Now, these challenging times, let me reflect on the policies and then I'll close. These challenging times bear a striking similarity, I believe, to the time America faced in 1980. Then, as now, we stand at a fault line of history. An economy in decline, joblessness stretched as far as the eye can see, alarming social upheaval, and an America pushed around abroad and full of self-doubt at home. We need smart and decisive leadership to fix America's problems while there's still time. Because truth be told that in many respects, elites in both political parties, then as now, have failed to give us government as good as our people. But that's about to change again. So how will it change? Well, everything begins with security. Americans of every background recognize the common dangers that we all face. This week, it will be 15 years since 9/11. It's hard to believe. The threats and dangers have not receded. In fact, as you learned in shocking and heartbreaking tragedy here in California, they are closer and more serious than ever before. During the Trump presidency, I can assure you, we will restore the arsenal of democracy. We will restore the alliances that keep us strong and secure. And we will have a commander-in-chief, as you heard last night and heard yesterday, who will take those resources and those new alliances, and we will hunt down and destroy those who threaten our people and inspire those who would bring us harm. Donald Trump, like Ronald Reagan, will rebuild America's military. It's extraordinary to think that since 1991, our active duty armed forces have diminished from 2 million to just 1.3 million today. Our Navy has shrunk from a fleet of over 500 ships down to 272. The Air Force is roughly 1/3 smaller. The armed forces deserve better. Like Reagan, Donald Trump knows that we can only have peace if America is strong. And on day one of a Trump administration, Donald Trump, as he announced yesterday, will submit a new budget to rebuild our military, an active army of 540,000 soldiers, as the Army Chief of Staff says he needs. He will build a Marine Corps based on 36 battalions, a Navy of 350 surface ships. Our Air Force will have at least 1,200 fighter aircraft. We will modernize our naval cruisers, enforce our classification rules, command relevant departments to conduct a thorough review of cyber defenses, and America will once again be known as the arsenal of democracy. As the proud father of a United States Marine, let me promise you this. Our new Commander-in-Chief will support our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines with the resources and the training they need to get the job done safe and come home to us. That's probably why so many military families are supporting this campaign. It's probably why so many veterans make their way to Trump-Pence rallies around the United States. In fact, could I just ask any men and women who've worn the uniform of the United States of America, could you stand, or if you're able, or raise your hand and just allow us to show one more installment of appreciation? Thank you for your service. A strong military and a strong America, Ronald Reagan knew, makes for a strong America in the world, an America that the world takes seriously. Donald Trump and I know what Ronald Reagan knew, and that is America needs to be strong for the world to be safe. Foreign policy record of this administration has weakened America's place in the world. It's extraordinary to think of the policies of this administration and of Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. To take a picture of the Middle East from the day they took office and look at a map of the Middle East today, it almost doesn't look like the same place. Civil war in Syria, the rise and rule of the ISIS caliphate, a civil war in Libya, and terrorist forces that have overrun the hard-fought gains that were secured in the last Republican administration by our soldiers when this administration took office. Iraq, Libya, the wider Middle East, the rise of greater and more emboldened Russia, a more emboldened China, its activities in the South China Sea, Russia's interventions in Ukraine. It all has a vague familiarity to it from those days in the 1970s. Then, as now, there were examples of monumental bad judgment. And also, there were examples that demonstrated that truth of history that Reagan knew, that Donald Trump knows, that weakness arouses evil. And weak foreign policy by the United States of America emboldens our enemies, abandons our friends, and those days are over, starting November the 8th. But similar to those times as well is the times that we live in our economy. The last 7.5 years, we've seen an administration whose policies have stifled the American economy. It's extraordinary to think of it. We are in the midst of the slowest economic recovery since the Great Depression. We have, a few days now after Labor Day, we have the lowest labor participation rate in this country since the 1970s. Don't be deceived by the low unemployment rate. The truth is that there are millions and millions of men and women in this country who aren't counted in that number because they simply aren't looking for work anymore. And probably most heartbreaking of all, there are nearly 7 million more Americans living in poverty today than the day that Barack Obama became president of the United States. Well, their nominee, her plan, is more of the same. More taxes, more regulation, more Obamacare, and more of the war on American energy that has run our nation's economy into a ditch. Well, let me promise you, just as in those days that we celebrate and remember on these walls, we're about to elect a president who knows that the strength of the American economy is in the ingenuity and the freedom of the American people. And Donald Trump will empower the American people to revive this economy again. Donald Trump at the Detroit Economic Club, a place that Ronald Reagan used to like to speak, laid out a plan to revive our economy on those time-honored practices and principles. I always like to say conservative ideas work every time you try them. They work back in the Hoosier State, where we have more Hoosiers working than ever before, and they'll work again in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump's plan is going to sound familiar to some of you here in Reagan country. We're going to lower marginal rates on every American. We're going to end death taxes once and for all. We're going to lower the corporate tax rate so American businesses can compete with businesses around the world and keep jobs here. Reagan also knew what Donald Trump knows, and that is regulation is a form of taxation. So on day one, Donald Trump will do what we did in the Hoosier State. He's going to sign a moratorium on any new federal regulation, and he's going to repeal every single one of Barack Obama's job-killing executive orders. When Donald Trump becomes negotiator-in-chief, we're also going to have trade deals that work for American workers. We're going to make sure. Donald Trump and I both believe in free trade, but we believe in arm's-length transactions. We believe trade needs to be a win-win. We're going to renegotiate NAFTA to ensure that it works for the people of the United States. We're going to get out of these multinational deals like the TPP, and at the end of the day, we're going to hold our trading partners at last to the promises that they make when they sign a deal with the people of the United States of America. And lastly, the fact that we're running against someone who actually boasted. And I quote, if she was elected president, quote, "We will put a lot of coal miners and coal companies out of business," close quote. On day one of the Trump-Pence administration, we will end the war on coal once and for all, and we will unleash the boundless power of the natural resources of the United States of America. Let me speak to one other matter and then close and get to your questions. And that is on, we'll elect literally, as the calendar speaks today, on September the 8th, 2 months, November the 8th, we'll elect a president for the next 4 years. But it's so important for those of us that cherish the ideals and the legacies of Ronald Reagan to remember that while we're electing a president for the next 4 years, that president will likely set the course and direction of the Supreme Court of the United States for the next 40 years. And we need to think long and hard about that. Donald Trump, for his part, has made it clear. When he becomes President of the United States of America, from the Supreme Court on down, we will appoint to the federal judiciary men and women who will strictly construe the Constitution of the United States and not legislate from the bench. Ronald Reagan said it so well. And I quote, "The importance of judicial restraint, the belief of our founding fathers that the role of the judge is to interpret the law, not preempt the rights of the people and their legislatures by making the law." Judicial restraint, the role of the judge. You know, I've said throughout this speech that Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump had similar views on some key issues, similar ideals and similar backbone. But let me be very clear with you. After my 10 years on the Judiciary Committee on Capitol Hill, working in and around these issues for a lifetime, Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump's views on the Supreme Court are not similar, they are identical. And he will appoint justices that will make the Reagan tradition proud on our Supreme Court. And finally, one last point. You know, for too many in Washington, in the view of too many Americans, politics seems to have morphed into a rigged game of self-enrichment and cronyism. One great Democrat that I'm pretty sure Ronald Reagan admired, Harry Truman, put it this way, quote, "No young man should go into politics if he wants to get rich." Truman said, quote, "An honest public servant can't become rich in politics," close quote. Well, the Pences passed that test. Yet what do we see today? We see politicians enter office with modest means and they emerge as millionaires. Auctioning access, profiting off policies is anathema to the very spirit of public service. You know, in places like Allentown, Pennsylvania, Youngstown, Ohio, Fort Wayne, Indiana, people don't know how to work the system, they just know how to work. All they ask for is that chance. And in a Trump-Pence administration, we're going to make sure they have it. Americans are fed up with Washington's self-enrichment racket. I think that's why independents, Republicans, and many Democrats are reeling from the headlines that we see one day after another. Reagan knew what Donald Trump knows. We must have the highest standards of integrity in the highest office in the land, and we will when Donald Trump becomes President of the United States. So, 1980, 2016. Two different men, two different times, but so much seems familiar, does it not? The challenges that we face, the opportunity that we have. I cracked open that old book this morning, and I happened to land in Ecclesiastes that said millennia ago that there's nothing new under the sun. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. Boy, I sure hope so. But I'm here to tell you, and I'm very humbled to be in this place with you all. Charlotte and I had the great privilege of laying a wreath at the final resting place of this wonderful couple that changed our country and changed the world. It was an emotional moment for me. But I want to give you a word of encouragement as well. That something big is stirring in our country. And it's coming from the American people. I mean, the spirit of 1980 that propelled Ronald Reagan into the White House is alive and kicking again. I see it every day. I just joined this ticket a little more than 6 weeks ago, but I can tell you, campaigning with Donald Trump and for Donald Trump, I see in the faces of Americans in big cities and small towns an optimism, a determination that I think is going to turn this country around. I see it in the faces of the thousands that we meet on the campaign trail. People failed by an out-of-touch Washington elite. And I had a woman walk up to me just the other day, and she just said to me, "Thank you for running with Donald Trump. I can't wait to vote." It's 61 days from an opportunity we have to restore confidence to our people, to have America standing tall again, at home and abroad, to have an economy that's working for all of our people on a foundation of our Constitution and the high standards in public life that we all expect in this nation. But I have faith. I think we're going to do it. And it's not because of the polls. I don't pay a whole lot of attention to the polls. I learned a long time ago, you get into a rough campaign, you got to turn on the television with a stick every morning. You with me? What's going to be there? But it's something else. And it was manifested in two conversations I'll close with. One with my running mate and one with the man whose name is on this building. The rest of that conversation with Ronald Reagan in 1988 happened in the East Room I did the little photo op thing with him for that 5 minutes, and got up, started breathing again. Then I walked into the East Room. My wife was waiting there with some other couples, or maybe 30 of us in the room. We were just to hold there and wait till the president departed, but he all of a sudden burst into the room. You might remember those days. He actually, I think, said, "I heard there was some ladies in here and I wanted to meet you all." Well, there was a great moment where my wife got to ask him a question. He got a few questions. He took a few questions from that little podium in the East Room. And several people asked about policies and important things. My wife raised her hand and said, "Where's Nancy?" And he really melted. Made a point to reach way over and shake her hand before he left the room. But he said something that day that I'll just never forget. So I guess a couple other people must have said to him what I'd said when I told him that I wanted to thank him for what he'd done for the country. Because before he left, he said, several of you made a point to thank me for what I'd done for this country for the last 8 years. It was August 1988. America had come roaring back. The Soviet Union was back on its heels. We were standing tall again at home and abroad. He said, several of you have thanked me for what I did for this country. And then he said, I want you to know I don't think I did anything for this country. He said, I think the American people decided to right the ship. And I was just the captain they put on the bridge when they did it. We were riding over to the convention. I think it was the night of his speech. And Donald Trump, ever the coach, ever the CEO, was sitting next to me. And he was saying to me, Mike, he said, we got a great opportunity here. We got a great opportunity for this country. And he said to me, well, we're going to have to work. I felt like I was in a locker room. He said, we're going to have to go after it. We're going to have to roll our sleeves up. We're going to have to just make it happen. We're going to work on it. He goes, but we get to Election Day, and he said, we get this thing done with the American people. It's going to be great. And there was this confidence, this lilt in his voice, and I hadn't heard that since 1988 in the East Room. In both of these men, I just want to tell you, there's so much that's different in terms of their style and their background. But at the very core, both Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump are united in a boundless faith in the American people. And that's why I know in this moment that if all of us will do all that we can to elect this good man as the 45th President of the United States of America, if we put that new captain on the bridge, I know we will make America great again. Thank you very much. And God bless you. Thank you for the honor of being here today.
Take one question. Sure. Just a remarkable speech, Governor. Thank you so much. We have time for one, maybe two questions if we go through this quickly. And, all right, we'll do two. No, that's fine, please, Governor. Some people were nice enough as they came through to write questions down, and so we've got a whole stack here, which we'll do the top two. The first, Governor, is would you propose a law or a rule that would prevent influence selling by anyone in government so a Clinton Foundation type fiasco does not happen again?
Well, Donald Trump has already laid out policies and plans. And we'll continue to lay out those plans with regard to individuals and their ability to advocate for foreign interests. I think it's one of the things that's so troubling about what we see unfurling and becoming more and more public every day, is that we're talking about, in large part, foreign contributors to the Clinton Foundation. Now remember, and there's some school kids here, foreign interests and foreign contributors cannot participate in American politics under our law. And so the fact that there was a vehicle while she was Secretary of State for foreign companies and foreign interests and foreign individuals to donate to the Clinton Foundation, I think should be deeply troubling to every American. And then, thanks to the Associated Press, we found that more than half of the private meetings that the Secretary of State granted during her tenure as Secretary of State, 85 of the nearly more than 150 meetings were extended to people that had given millions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation, and in many cases foreign contributors. Senator Richard Lugar, who is an icon in Indiana and a man of enormous integrity, actually warned Secretary Clinton of this issue during her confirmation hearings and warned her against the interest that foreign companies and foreign individuals would have in contributing and seeking access and even favors through the Clinton Foundation. And I can just promise you, the days of the pay-to-play politics in Washington, D.C. are over the day that Donald Trump becomes president of the United States. Okay?
Second and final question, what is the biggest misconception about Donald Trump?
Someone came up to me the other day and they said, I've known Donald Trump for a long time and I really like him. And I said, I haven't known him very long at all, and I really like him. You know, we've had a chance to get to know the Trump family, our family did, even before this opportunity was extended to me. When they were considering a number of highly qualified men and women for this position, they graciously invited us to come and spend a weekend with them. Because we tend to make decisions as a family, as the Pence family, and the Trumps are the same way. I mean, to know Donald Trump is to know very, very quickly he loves his family and he loves this country. But I think one of the things that I was most touched by was his graciousness and his kindness. You know, he's, as I said at the Republican National Convention, you know, we have a larger-than-life nominee, very charismatic, and so they obviously wanted to balance the ticket. Right? But when we came out, Charlotte was with Karen and me when we went out and spent the weekend with them, and what we found is all of that energy is there in person. What you see is what you get with Donald Trump. I'll never forget my daughter said this. She might be mad if I quote her. But we got on the plane after we'd spent a whole weekend with him, and my daughter said, well, he was Trump the whole weekend, but he's so nice. You like that? Is that all right?